Hi everybody, welcome into the Irish NFL show presented by Trust Gaming. Happy Sunday. This week we are live, or recorded live, from the Woolshed Bar and Grill in central Dublin. Back in the Woolshed. Boys, we're back. Where's Mark? You're probably all thinking right now, he's not here. But we're delighted to be joined with Colin, Brian and Tadhg leader. Tadhg, how's the form? How are we getting on?
All as well. Cheers for having me on. It's good to just go back to Ireland a week or so ago, so it's nice to, having done my quarantine and all those kind of bits and pieces, nice to get out here and finally meet you lads in person after all the help you've given me since day one when I started kicking footballs.
We're hoping, it was great to see you over in the Spring League as well. But Colin, it was great to see somebody from Ireland just sort of make it a bit in America, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's what for us, to see somebody kicking in Lucas Oil Stadium, where home to the Colts. What was that experience like for you?
I literally just got goosebumps there thinking about the day before the first game, walking out there in Lucas Oil. I was just the structure, the size of the stadium. I've never played in an indoor stadium, let alone whatever that has, 60, 70,000. It was mad, just kind of getting on the pitch, walking around the field, walking around, and you just kind of see, the way in the distance, where the different camera guys and stuff would be, thinking wow, that looks like it's miles away. Just the sheer scale of everything I'd never been in an arena like that before. So to most of the lads, my teammates and stuff, when I was telling them this is my debut, first ever game, they were just like, do you realize how ridiculous that sounds, like getting to play here in this arena when most guys play PB football or whatever when they're 5 or 6. So playing in that arena was mad, class experience. But it was at the time, it was just a bit like, wow, what the hell am I doing here?
And in terms then of even I suppose I'd find the language pitch, field, kit, uniform, all that stuff. Did that come up at all during your time in the Spring League, where you were using terminology that was different from your teammates?
Yeah, that was. Well, the biggest one was I'd be like, lads, what time's training? And then they'd be like, training? It's like practice. So that was the biggest one, training and practice. I never got there. To be fair, a lot of the lads ended up going with it, because a lot of the Americans, I guess, I was such a novelty, so different. So then they ended up using different slang that I would use, and different phrases. And by the end, most of the lads are all saying cheers, cheers, cheers. So that was another one they all liked. And but yeah, that was the ones you listed there in training was one that different things you wouldn't think of when you make conversation. Or even I had one instance in a game where the coach wanted me to do a squib kick, which I understood it, but he used, I don't know what he used, but he used a different phraseology to what he wanted me to do. So I went out and did a squib kick, and then he kind of came over to me and was like, "What the hell was that?" And I was like, "Is that not a squib kick?" And then the coach just kind of looked at me and he's like, "That's not what I wanted." And I don't even know what he wanted now to this day. It worked out, thankfully, because their lad kind of fumbled and it worked out. But just little things like that. And I was on the sideline then being like, did I mess up there? And the guys were like, no, that was good, don't worry about it. But different vocab they would use that we'd say differently, or we just wouldn't even talk because it's not it's not a thing we do. So I definitely ran into a few little roadblocks with that. But usually the lads are like something foreign, something different.
Tadhg, I'm just conscious that there might be viewers watching the show that didn't have the opportunity to watch the first time you were on the show a few months back. Do you want to give a bit of a background as to how you found yourself to come into the Spring League and that initial kind of phase of going from rugby into American football?
Yeah, rugby being my background, kicking was always my biggest asset in rugby. So went through the Irish system, then went into the pro ranks. Played around the European stuff, and then moved over to the States. Played professionally in the States, and when I got there, everyone was always, "You should kick footballs. You should kick footballs." To which I was playing rugby, doing well, and I just got started with playing for the U.S. national team. So that was huge for me to play international rugby. So as much, it was just things people would say to me. Never put much thought into it. And then when COVID struck, I was doing some coaching a rugby team in Massachusetts, and we were doing some goal setting, and I was chatting to one of the guys about what he wanted to achieve for the upcoming season, how I could help him. And he just mentioned he was a high school football coach, to which I was like, oh, actually, do you mind if I just try and give the footballs a bit of a whack, just get on and kick a few, just for fun. this was late August of last year. Did that and hit a few pretty good, enough that he coached high school, so he was like, that's very good. And then there was people walking around the track, and then they stopped to start watching me kick. And then I was like 55, 57 yards. I kind of worked myself back to, so nothing like outrageous, but it's still a pretty big kick. And then just from that experience kicking, I absolutely loved it. My groin was shattered after, because I was out there for 2 or 3 hours. Because in rugby I love kicking. Yeah. I didn't necessarily love having to run into big lads. I didn't necessarily want to have to tackle the big lads, but I love kicking. So that was late August of last year, and then just kind of...
It's a win-win situation then, really.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. All going well. I shouldn't get touched, so that's great. I just got to give it a swing a leg at it. So it is a win-win. But that was last year, and then from there, just met a kicking coach in Connecticut to see was I actually good, or was I just, decent compared to what a high school football coach knew. And then from there, I literally did 3 or 4 kicks with him. And then he just kind of stopped and goes, you need to go see John, which is John Carney out in San Diego, NFL 24 years or so in the league. Trained with him and went well. He's like, yeah, I think you could do it. So then that was November, December, and made the decision to jump into football full time. And the hard thing about football is as I'm finding out, if you don't play in college, there's no real route to go. There's no set route. There's no pathway. It's not like rugby. If you're not playing professionally, you can play for the local club and work your way up. That doesn't exist in football. So when the spring league came along, that was perfect, because it's hard to get into, because there's 8 teams and only 32 guys in the league with jobs. So to get one of those 8 slots was very hard. Thankfully, I got one, and then that experience was class. But that's kind of how I got into it over the last 10, 11 months, and hopefully a good road ahead.
Yeah, before we talk about your next steps now, which we'll talk about in a second, I mean, like, you brought up a very good point there. If we're very fortunate in Ireland to see the growth of rugby and how good we are, it's probably the one thing we're all good at in terms of sport in the country. But I actually see, like, there's teams obviously across America. There's a team that plays rugby in SoFi Stadium, but I don't know what their name is. But
yeah, LA Gattinis.
Yeah, like the first ever fans in that new stadium was for that rugby game as well. But you went into the spring league, and we sort of briefly talked about it previously, but really thinking about it now, you were playing during COVID-19. I know the US has largely moved on now, you got crowds and stuff, but you were playing in Lucas Oil Stadium at a time where there was empty crowds, and at a time now we're in the NFL where we're talking about vaccinating players, vaccinating staff. What was that like, playing under those restrictions? Was it very, secure, or was it very strict behind the scenes as well, or what was it like?
I think this was March, April time. So at that point, it was very much encouraged that if you can get vaccinated. So that's what I'd say. Well, I'd say well over 50% chose to go that route. And if you didn't, you then had to get tested 3 times a week. But April time, rules were getting a little bit more lax over there. Around, I've been home here a week, and just having to wear a mask all the time again is, it feels like I'm gone back a year. So there was rules in place, but they probably weren't as strict as, they weren't overly strict, but I think the idea was to get everyone vaccinated as soon as possible. But yeah, for me, I guess the main thing was, on the bus to training every day, on the bus to practice every day. I want to try and get that in my vocabulary, practice. But on the bus to practice, you'd stick the mask on, and then in the team meals, we're all in the same hotel, you'd wear a mask. But beyond that, it was kind of do as you please, as long as you're vaccinated and or getting tested.
And so you've played like in front of crowds. What was it like playing without crowds? Like, do you as notice that, because you're on the sideline so much in football as opposed to rugby? Like, was it very different for you?
Yeah, well, my big thing about when you have crowds, it brings a lot of white noise. So I find, if I'm taking a kick in rugby, for example, you can hear a lot of white noise in the back, and people could be abusing you or whatever. But like, you don't really fully recognize it. You just hear this kind of white noise, and you stay within your process. But for football, and I guess I've never played in front of fans in football, so I've only known COVID times. But what I noticed pretty quickly as well, you can hear everyone. And like, the lads that are 9 yards away screaming abuse at you, hey 41, whatever, and like saying some not nice things. So the first kick, for the, when I got onto the pitch and getting lined up, it was like, wow, I can hear everyone so clearly. So that was, I couldn't. And once you get like 5 seconds pre-kick, then you kind of you lose it. But you lose that hearing. But that was probably one of the weirdest things. You could just hear everything, which was also pretty cool when I was on the sideline, because then I got to hear what's happening in the game itself. And the amount of, we'd say, shy talk, the amount of smack, they might say, was ridiculous. Like, just non-stop lads just chirping, just getting at each other all the time. Some of it was ruthless. And so that was hilarious as well. I might just be sitting on the sideline drinking my water and just hearing the boys just back and forth. The guys on the sideline and the guys on the pitch who were getting it, they shoot back pretty quick. So that was, I imagine in non-COVID times might have been harder to hear all that. So that was a pretty funny thing to see.
Tadhg, when you speak to people who don't really watch American football, they look at the kicker and the punter as, God, that's a very handy position. But I think you touched on it in the past. It's only when you actually get into the game you recognise how particular that position really is. And you've happened to play now punter and kicker during your time, so you've shown a bit of versatility in terms of what you can bring to the table. Is there one in particular you prefer over the other? And just talk to us about how unique it is to play in those positions.
I'd say kicking is probably my preference, just because it's a lot more similar to rugby, at least the striking component, the kicking it off the deck. So that's probably, but I really enjoyed punting. Just in rugby nowadays, you don't see people spiral the ball as much. You don't see usually that end over end kick, whereas in football, they really want to see that clean spiral. So more kind of used to the kicking aspect. But from actually doing the job, I had no clue. I know how quick everything happens, how precise everything is. And if it's someone is it, you know what I mean, 0.5 of a second off, or sorry, way less, like 0.1 of a second off, you're getting blocked, or the guys rushing up the middle. So for field goals, you have like from the snapper to me getting the kick off, you have like 1.2 to 1.3 seconds. And if you take longer than that, you're getting blocked off the edge or maybe up the middle. And then punting, same thing now. We're like 14 yards back, and you have like kind of 1.2 seconds to get it done. So I had no appreciation leading into it, just because it's one thing kicking, like I said, when I first started kicking, I was just kicking off, my shorts and t-shirt, no, didn't have to deal with the rush, didn't have to deal with the snap and hold. But when all those things were joined together, it was like, wow, I can see why guys miss sometimes, because it's happens so fast and so specific. So that was, I think watching on TV, you see someone miss and you think, like, how did you miss that? But like when you're actually standing there and you realize that if one thing's off, the odds of success drastically go down.
We spoke to Graham Gano, Giants kicker, who's in the league 10, 15 years, and he kind of vouched for that type of stuff. 1 second off, the field goal's going left or getting blocked, and how precise it was. Not just the kicker itself, but the offensive line to the snap, to the holder, to the kicker. And
actually, just one point on that. One good thing about punting, which I realised, was in punting, you are a little bit less reliant on others, because I remember I missed a field goal and I absolutely smacked the laces of the ball. Obviously in a deal where the laces are out, you don't kick the laces. But you're always very much relying on other people as well to kind of set you up for you to finish it off. Whereas at least in punting, you are your own holder, and then you obviously perform the kick. So that is a little bit more individual, which I kind of liked, because watching the game, if the kick goes wide, you're not going to necessarily, the kicker missed, that's it. But if your ball's supposed to, which I've learned, if the ball's supposed to be leaned a few inches to the right, and all of a sudden it's a lean a few inches forward to the left, the ball has been totally, if you want it here, all of a sudden it's there. Like it's a big difference. So punting, I'm starting to grow on me, because it's more so on you, which if it goes well, great, but if it doesn't, not great. But that was something that I didn't appreciate until I got into games, how different the roles are as well.
Absolutely, and we believe, Tadhg, that you may or may not have some new. Well, I mean, look, this news is already out now because it's coming out on Sunday, but you've made a decision on where you're going to go next, and it is quite exciting news.
Yeah, since the Spring League ended, I had potential opportunities to go play in the Canadian League, but up there they have like a 3-year kind of time commitment, which is a lot, and then you want to, obviously the NFL's the goal. So yeah, I was kind of sitting back and had my footage from the Spring League, had sent that out and hoping that might get some interest from NFL teams, especially, as you said, as kicker and punter, which is beneficial. So I was just going to kind of sit and wait and hope the phone eventually rings. But fortunately, I've got a really good opportunity now. A few days ago, the European League of Football. I think they're trying to make like the NFL of old, so there's like 8 teams: Poland, Spain, and Germany. And I just signed with Wrocław Panthers. They're based in Poland, so. So far, it's been extremely professional. Like just in terms of the dialogue between me and the team, watch their games. Nice stadium, good crowds, good. It looks the real deal. Before signing with them, I talked to a guy, Giorgio Tavecchio. He kicked for the Raiders and I think the Falcons. He's been around the league a little bit, and he just signed with the Barcelona team maybe a week or two ago. So I called him and said, "Hey, how'd you find the league?" And he just said, "If you have the opportunity to go play, because." The alternative is what everyone else is, just sitting down waiting for a call. If you can accumulate footage, let alone a guy that's only played 6 games in his entire career. So I'm absolutely thrilled to go. And when this comes out, I should be there and hopefully getting ready. First game is on Sunday against Cologne. So that'll be pretty cool. And getting to go to see cool cities around Germany and Spain as well. So yeah, kicking, punting, the journey continues.
And we can watch you on, it's called the European League of Football Game Pass. It's literally called Game Pass, so you can, if you're in Ireland or the UK, check it out. It is quite cheap, so definitely, and best luck out there as well. It's going to be great.
Sound, yeah.
And I suppose one of the things it's great to again see an Irish player kind of going and doing this, but one of the things that a lot of players we've seen from the UK, F.A. Obada, who's now with the Bills, and Aidan Durday, who's now a coach with the Cowboys, I think that might change even hopefully the international player pathway. Is that something kind of that like you could see growing for Irish players, that maybe or even yourself, that opportunity to go to be on to do training camp, to be on a practice squad, is that something that you could see in the future become a bigger factor for people in Ireland? Because at the moment we have some kids who go over to college, but if you don't get that opportunity at say 17, as you said, it's very difficult after that at the moment.
Yeah, extremely difficult. If I didn't have like a professional rugby career of a background, I had the exact same ability I have, I'd be pretty confident I wouldn't have got the opportunities in the spring league and things like that. It definitely helped me a lot. So you're right, like unless you can get into that college scene early, it'd be very difficult. But the pathway stuff's brilliant. I mean, exemptions made on rosters, practice squad to get an extra foreign player in a certain amount of teams. Because that's huge. Because I think most lads, when you get obviously you're talented to be in the program. When you get into that environment, I think you're naturally going to be a sponge first of all, and I think naturally a lot of guys are going to rise to the occasion and actually do quite well. So I think personally I'd love to be involved in it. They don't carry kickers at the moment, which is a bit of a shame because, as I said, for the reason I just listed, I think it's an amazing opportunity. Yep. So fingers crossed they might be interested in kickers in sooner rather than later. But from an Irish player's perspective, Irish guys moving forward, I think it's I had no knowledge of football really, or like American football, and getting to what it was all about. I guess not really exposed to it here too much, just playing Madden, and the odd Sunday I'd see the game on Sky Sports. But I think now there's a few lads in the college game, right? And hopefully it becomes more, at least awareness grows. If lads want to give it a go, they can at least have people they can maybe reach out to and ask questions, which is something I unfortunately didn't have. So you're trying to find that roadmap on your own. So fingers crossed, more lads see it and they think, I'd love to have a crack off that and get involved and kind of grow the sport here as well.
Tadhg, you've been home for a few weeks now, and I suppose you're in the States for quite a while. I suppose it's been nice to be home, and just while you're over there, were you still keeping an interest on sports this side of the world? Like as you said, you're still a keen rugby fan, and the Lions tour is going on, and there's a Connacht final today and stuff. So, where was it been over there, trying to keep an eye on everything that's going on back home? It
was funny because just in the drive up, I noticed I didn't realise. I know the hurlers played yesterday at Galway, but I didn't realise the football was on today. So in seeing the cars, I was wondering, a lot of Galway Reg and Mayo Reg and other plates on the motorway this morning. And I'm sure I don't know if you got a chance to see them this morning, but there's loads of them knocking around. But yeah, it's hard. I try and keep as involved with kind of watching that stuff as I can. Time differences can be a bit of an issue at times, but thankfully, being home now at a reasonable hour to watch the Lions game yesterday. Wasn't the most entertaining game, but I think that was expected. Two physical teams going against it. But yeah, it's funny. I was living in Boston for a while, and the amount of people like passion there around that city they had for the kind of the GAA and stuff it was class to see, and so it's really popular. It's really popular in Boston's obviously it's like home away from home, but it's cool to see the amount of interest in the GAA across the pond.
I happened to be in New York on the morning of an All Ireland. I was actually going for a Giants game in MetLife, and it wasn't Dublin for a change, but it was actually Kerry and Mayo, so the inevitable result there. But to see all the bars at like 10 o'clock in the morning in New York full was really enjoyable.
I think Boston is like Dublin on steroids. I'll never forget going to Boston for the first time. But Tadhg, we'd like to wish you all the very best in Poland. I think it's going to be cool to see you do the next step. And I am fortunate to produce Jeff Reinbold's show, and he had Patrick Izume on, who's the commissioner of the league. Yeah, and to hear what he said about that league, I'm honestly, I would like to think there'll be either a British or an Irish team there very soon with that expansion opportunity. So I think, not just us because Mark's not here, but Mark as well. We'd like to wish you the very best, and hopefully we can nab a trip out to Poland or Cologne over the next few weeks. So.
A rerun of Euro 2012, yeah.
You're right.
I can remember that trip.
Well, Tadhg, thanks a million for coming on, and we appreciate your time. Thank you very much, man.
Cheers, lads. Thanks very much, and cheers to the pint of Guinness as well.
Okay, folks, and that was Tadhg, leader in Dublin. We're not in Dublin anymore, unfortunately. We're on the internet, but we thought of having a different section this week because there's been so much going on this week, lads, and Colin, Brian, welcome in. But there's a few topics that we want to touch on. The first one being Aaron Rodgers, who made his return to training camp this week after the Summer of Rodgers. It looks like the Summer of Rodgers might take place now next summer or the summer after, as a deal has been restructured and the old gang is back together in Randall Cobb. Before we hear the lads' opinions, here is what Aaron Rodgers had to say after the first day of training camp.
A number of players that I felt like were core players to our foundation, our locker room, high character guys. I'm talking about Charles Woodson, Jordy Nelson, Julius Peppers, Clay Matthews, Randall Cobb, James Jones, John Kuhn, Brett Good, TJ Lang, Brian Balaga, Casey Hayward, Micah Hyde, guys who were exceptional players for us, but great locker room guys, high character guys. Many of them who weren't offered a contract at all, or were extremely lowballed, or were, maybe in my opinion, not given the respect on the way out that guys of their status and stature and high character deserved.
And that's what Aaron Rodgers had to say. Interesting, Colin. Is it just me, Colin, or nobody's talked about this? Maybe I've missed this, but it looks as if Aaron Rodgers was literally reading that off a sheet the whole time. He was sitting like this, it's almost as if he had a speech written, ready to go. And Colin, probably one of the most memorable moments in training camp in history, I would say.
Well, maybe he had the sheet of notes like Rafa Benitez's facts from a few years ago, similar sort of press conference vibe to it. Look, this was the way it was always going to end. Rodgers wasn't going to get out as he wanted. I'm reminded of that Chris Rock line about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. He said Shaq is rich. The guy who signs Shaq's checks is wealthy. Aaron Rodgers is rich. Aaron Rodgers has a lot of say in what he does. The Green Bay Packers, they own his rights. They got the final decision. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch it play out over the season and see what they choose to do. Are they going to allow him, if he has another MVP caliber season, to walk away after that? We could see changes potentially in that front office. We've already seen conciliatory moves, but as I had said, to me this always seemed very Cristiano Ronaldo-esque. So it is possible that Aaron Rodgers gets his move next offseason. They get something for him, or they may choose to hang on and let him walk for free the year after when he'll be 40. I still think you'd undoubtedly get NFL teams that would take him. But look, this is exactly what you want. You want to be in a situation when you're going into training camp that you know who your starting QB is. It's a situation that not every team is in, and we'll get to that. But for Green Bay, they're set up now. They've restructured the contract. They've brought in somebody for Rodgers who he wanted. And by the sounds of things, from what I'm hearing this evening, they still have about 12 million to play with. So we may see one or two more come in there as well.
I mean, Brian, they're getting all the guys back together. But the one thing, Brian, that Tommy Rooney mentioned on last week's show in Dublin was they're calling it the last dance between Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, for me, you can't really compare Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams to Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, because I think at that point, Brian, they had won 3 championships in a row. So, I mean, I guess we could come back to that, but obviously a restructured deal for Rodgers. What's your thoughts on that? And guys like Randall Cobb coming in as well.
Yeah, I think the Packers, it's unusual because what have they conceded in all of this? Everybody felt that they'd have to concede a lot for Rodgers to come back. I was taken back by the openings of his interview, albeit, yeah, we're all very much aware of what his issues are with the general workings and how the team is run. But for him to be so open in his very first interview, I was a bit taken back with that. What have they conceded? They voided the 2023 contract, but at that stage, even if Rodgers wanted to remain with the team, they would have to be making a decision in terms of the long-term plan for Julian Love as quarterback, because you're going into his 4th year as a rookie quarterback without him playing. So I think they've kind of got what they wanted. Next year they can still move him if they feel the need. Are we guaranteed they will move him next year? Because there was a report last week that he was assured after the championship game that he would be traded this offseason. And when it got to the draft and he wasn't traded, that's when he decided to make the move in terms of letting stories creep out in the media with Adam Schefter and so on, to basically try and move that thing on, because he wasn't given the deal. They didn't fulfill their end of the bargain. So what's to say in 12 months' time, if they were to win the Super Bowl and he's playing at an MVP level, that they'll turn around and say, yeah, we'll move you. They might say, and what's to say 12 months' time he'll want to move? We just don't know. And then 12 months on, which teams are going to need a quarterback? You know, the dynamic of the league changes every year. So who do we know? You know, I know you are keen to get him in Denver. What's to say your quarterback doesn't have an unbelievable season and things have moved on? You never know. I thought it was quite funny that Randall Cobb turns around and says, I got out of prison, you know, and it's great to be back in Green Bay. And Aaron Rodgers has been trying to get out of Green Bay. So, you know, one person sees things very different to the other. But I'm surprised Randall Cobb is back. He's very much back because Rodgers wants him. And I think they're trying to make him feel like he's getting a Brady scenario where Brady was able to ask for Gronk and Antonio Brown to be signed, and he really wanted Randall Cobb. But they drafted a slot receiver in the 3rd round, Mary Rodgers, who looks like he's quite an effective player from Clemson. So, you know, will Cobb get much playing action? I think it's more to have him there as a comfort for Rodgers than anything else.
It's a bit like Colin when you're just trying to make somebody happy, maybe when you've moved to a different country. Bring him over as well for the crack. I don't know. Colin, there's a good tweet that I seen from Greg Rosenthal from around the NFL, and he stated, I did not expect Randall Cobb to make the Texans roster. Getting the Packers to pay most of his salary was $5.25 million in fine money. Now, that's one discussion which Brian's talked on there, but something that Brian talked upon there, Colin, was, you know, going into looking at next season, because this already in media brings this discussion in the next season. Is there a suitor, do you think, for Rodgers if he was to leave next year? Because I could have sworn as well, I seen Schefter tweeted that he may not have that option either. So, I mean, I've seen guys talk about the Raiders. Is there anybody other than the Raiders or the Broncos or somebody else that sticks out to you?
Oh, look, so much changes. Brian mentioned, like, a year is a long time in football. A week is a long time in football. As you know, we're going to talk about Carson Wentz and what's gone on. You know, you can think that you're sorted, and all of a sudden, if your QB picks up a major injury, what happens then? So I think almost every team would, you know, have a look. Obviously not your Chiefs or your Chargers, but a significant number of teams, depending on what the cost is, but will be year on. We're not going to be talking 3 firsts for Aaron Rodgers next year. That's just the reality of the situation. It'll be very different. I have no doubt if it does happen, you know, there'll be plenty of suitors. But as Brian has said, if they were to win the Super Bowl, he could stay. They could end up moving on Jordan Love rather than Aaron Rodgers. So I think you know, what can seem an absolute certainty this year is not the case. It's not quite as set in stone. Let's see. But all of the power play that we saw at the beginning of the off season, with everyone making noises and wanting to move, well, everyone is reported to camp this week.
So Brian, just before we touch on the Packers, sorry for jumping in, the Packers have got the Saints, the Lions, the 49ers, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the new, I guess, the new coming of the Messiah, maybe in Justin Fields in week 6. Have your thoughts for the Packers this season increased or decreased after Rodgers' actions this week in training camp?
Increased significantly. I mean, we touched on it last week on the live show in the Woolshed. 2 years in a row, NFC Championship game. They're not far away. You look back at that game against the Bucs. Predominantly, I know people kind of go on in particular about the last drive and the play calling by the head coach and Rodgers necessarily not picking the right decision. But the defense on that day against the Bucs was very poor. They gave away a lot of touchdowns that they really should have. The secondary was quite poor, which has been really good all season. So no, I think they're very much in the shake-up to go to the Super Bowl. One thing I'd say about the Packers, for all the stick the GM and the owners have got, they held their own on this. This has gone on for 4 months. And they just kept to themselves, didn't put anything out in the media. First time they addressed the supporters and the shareholders was last Monday at the shareholder meeting. And they seemed very confident that he would come back. And at that stage, I think the decision was inevitable that he would come back. So fair play to them, they didn't buckle, they didn't panic and take the trade. They held their own in that instance.
Nothing better than holding your own. Goes on to our next topic. Carson Wentz, the former Eagles quarterback, Super Bowl winning quarterback, shall we say as well, leaves the NFC East, goes to the Indianapolis Colts this offseason. But, wow, I mean, I don't know how long he's going to be out for, and this might have come out by the time the show's been out, but he's going to at least miss the rest of the preseason with a foot injury. Colin, I seen Pat McAfee's tweet when he heard the news, like, no. I mean, I actually genuinely feel for Colts fans because this new era of going from Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz, it might not work out after all.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a nightmare start to the training camp for the Colts. Frank Reich tested positive for COVID. They lost their Pro Bowl center to a hyperextension of the elbow. I think Darius Leonard is out because he picked up an ankle injury. And then, like, at the beginning, you had the fact that Wentz, there was all the thing about, was he vaccinated? He does the press conference wearing a mask, which indicated that he wasn't. That suddenly the media is talking about that. And all of a sudden, apparently, he hears something pop in his foot on Thursday. At this stage, we don't know how bad that is. I'm sure people in Philadelphia are also wondering what that might mean for them in terms of what they're going to get in compensation. So it'll be interesting to see how long he's out for. We know that the Colts have a history of downplaying injuries, only for them to, be much more serious than was initially made out. Will that be the case here? We will have to wait and see. But it might mean that they could end up having to trade for somebody. Could Nick Foles end up, Wentz and Foles again? Could Gardner Minshew? Could the loser of the Broncos, QB competition end up in the Colts? All things are possible, but certainly for the Colts, who 2 weeks ago looked like they were really in contention, it hasn't been the easiest to start. A lot is going to come down to what the diagnosis and the prognosis is for Carson Wentz.
Brian, what Colin said there about the Colts, they downplayed Peyton Manning's neck injury in 2011. He obviously missed the season. They downplayed Luck's injury in 2017. Shoulder injury, he missed the season. And then they downplayed his injury in 2019. And he retired. So not a great history there. I feel for Colts fans, but surely, Brian, if you're a Titans fan, you must be buzzing.
Well, it's such a, I suppose, competitive division, and we all feel it's going to be the Titans against the Colts predominantly who's going to win the division. So to see him potentially with no quarterback really in position to take over, week 1 against Seattle, difficult game. I took time out to actually look at our show when we actually went live the evening of the trade, and the recurring theme across the forwards when Mark was here was, it looks like a good trade, but there's always the risk because he's had so many injuries throughout his few years in Philadelphia. But this one in particular actually looks like it's a new injury because he's never really had a foot injury before. So this looks like something completely isolated to what he's had in the past, with blowing out the knee during the year in which they won the Super Bowl, and he's had recurring injuries thereafter. The Foles one for me looks a really good show. I know people it looks on paper like it makes sense because Frank Reich is there, but from his point of view, he's going to be third choice in Chicago. Like Justin Fields inevitably is going to play at some stage. Dalton will start and he'll end up being the backup. So where does that leave Foles? He's got an opportunity to go to Indy, potentially start, and even if Wentz comes back in, what's to say he's going to play the whole season? And that particular part of the contract around which pick to give away now is very important. The 75% rule that he has to play. They were very clever in putting that in. They were covering themselves, in terms of not giving away that first round pick. I do think it's more serious than they're letting on. I actually think, I think he's going to miss substantial time. There was a piece last night, NFL Network, saying he could be back for week 1. It's highly unlikely. They're going to get a reevaluation next week. A reevaluation to me, it sounds like they haven't heard the news they want to hear and they're going off somewhere else to get it checked. So for me, I think he's going to be out for a considerable amount of time.
Obviously, we wish Carson a speedy recovery. It's not a great situation for him. So hopefully, Godspeed and all that there. Let's see what happens. He's obviously going to miss the preseason as well. Preseason starts in 4 days. Can you believe, gentlemen? It seems like 5 minutes ago since we were sitting after the Super Bowl thinking, well, we're going to leave for 7 months, but the preseason starts in 4 days. We're back with a special at 10 o'clock on Thursday night with special guests. The Cowboys are playing the Steelers in the Hall of Fame game early Friday morning. So if you need a Polisecki, there's your warning in advance. Lads, just finally, before we go here, Deshaun Watson, I talked about the Messiah for the Bears and Justin Fields, but Colin, Deshaun Watson is making a resurrection in Houston, gets a practice in this week, and Colin, I feel for Tyrod Taylor, man. This is just, we're getting to the point now where, is he going to have an easy go at it again, or, what's going to happen with Watson?
Well, this is an awful situation, right? Because you've got a guy who has 22 allegations of sexual assault. That's the first thing, and that in itself, I'm surprised in ways that the league hasn't taken action. So but the fact that they didn't, he then reported to camp. The Texans then have him play scout safety. The Texans are a mess. They are an absolute mess, and Dave Culley just seems out of his depth. Unfortunately, it just seems to be. I mean, you heard what Cobb said, like it was escaping from prison. That tells you, I mean, it's unbelievable that you can have these billion-dollar franchises, multi-billion-dollar franchises. What was it during they say that the next franchise could go up 6, 8, 10 billion with gambling now legalized, and the Texans have basically opted out. They've basically said they're just going to throw this season away, which is awful for their fans. You've got serious, passionate fans there in Texas and around the United States and around the globe. And it's almost a joke the way in which they run it. The lies that they're telling, they're treating people like toddlers with what they were saying. They're ramping up. He wasn't ready to take. I mean, Deshaun Watson. I mean, like there's the fact you could make the argument that he probably shouldn't be there. The league should have taken some action. But if you just take it on the physical side of it, like he's one of the top athletes, top quarterbacks in the league, and you're saying he's not ready to take snaps. That was ridiculous. It didn't make any sense. The Texans are a train wreck. Whether they win a single game this coming season remains to be seen for me.
I think that's a really good point. Will they win a game? I might get on to that and maybe have a little go on that. But talking about putting money in something, I mean, Brian, this whole training camp, we started off with Pelissero, Rappaport talking about the Texans were open to trading them. It did go quiet for a long time in regards to that, and it was almost pushed under the rug a little bit. But, where is he going to be week 1, Brian? Tell us with your infinite wisdom.
He'll be on the NFL's commissioner's exempt list, and I feel like he should have done that a lot sooner, because he's whilst the Texans are in a bad place in terms of how they're being run, the league hasn't helped him out by putting him in a position where he has to report because he's going to get fined every day if he doesn't. It's an unwelcome distraction because they're trying to move on to a certain extent. Of course, they're looking to trade him now, but like, who in their right mind is going to trade? What I know, like there's GMs out there with substantial amount of picks next year who can afford to give away 3 first rounders.
Why would anybody give up 3 first rounders now? They don't know the situation. They don't know if he's going to be on the exempt list. They don't know if he's going to be banned properly. They don't know if the case are going to go legal, or go to the courts as a criminal case. There's too many unknowns for any GM in their right mind to give up so many picks. You're gambling with the future on a player that you could pick and then he'd be suspended straight away, or he even might end up being suspended next year because by the time the cases come around, too big a risk for me. So I don't see him playing. I think it's an unwelcome distraction for the Texans. I do think they'll win games this year because I feel that they actually, well, it's not a great team. They've brought in some players that will be keen to make a point to previous teams, such as your Philip Lindsays and players like that, who are really good players in the league and can hold their own. And in terms of the quarterback situation, I think it'll be Tyrod Taylor, and then they'll move to Davis Mills, third round pick, at some stage, and hopefully he's the future for the team. So I can see them in 2-3 games max. But the Watson thing, it's a saga that they don't need, and it's just going to continue until he's put on the exempt list.
Time will tell. Like, there's never a dull moment in this league, is there? A new segment, which I haven't even told these other guys about yet, but we're going to do it now. 30 seconds each, AOB, any other business. My AOB this week, gentlemen, is this. The vaccine COVID situation. Obviously, the NFL come out with guidelines and state that, games can be cancelled if there are COVID-19 cases with unvaccinated players, etc., etc., etc. I don't see how that's going to happen without there being legal issues, because last year my team played without a quarterback instead of the game being moved when other teams had games moved. But for me, it's disappointing to hear, and I actually felt sorry for Coach Rivera this week, talking about his immune deficiency and obviously with the players, and there needs to be some sort of mutual understanding there. And it's interesting to see some teams that have a very low uptake in the vaccine rates, and I would love to maybe see the vaccine rate for the guys going to London, if they are at the minute as it stands, but I guess we'll see what happens there. But even today, Kirk Cousins is a high risk contact from Kellen Mond, who's tested positive. I think it's something you're going to see going forward, and it's something that we obviously have to live with, but it'll be interesting. Colin, AOB, anything you want to talk about?
Well, I think on that, Michael, I think because what we're seeing now, I think players will probably end up having to be vaccinated, because we heard Ryan Tannehill talk during the week that because of the protocols, he felt he had to do it because it would have been so difficult not to. And I think the fact that you're seeing this in training camp will mean that extra pressure will be applied to say, look, this is happening now in training camp. We can deal with it here. But what happens, we don't want to be in a situation where, like the Broncos were, where you're forced to play a game without a QB or without a secondary or without whatever it happens to be. That is certainly one to keep an eye on. I thought Tannehill's comments were pretty telling. And I think now the fact that teams are back in camp, once the preseason game pick up, once we go to traveling, it will be, I think the vaccine rates will really begin to push up at that point.
I can't guess Brian's AOB, but I'm sure, Colin, that Brian is delighted to have a Super Bowl 50 champion join his Giants this evening in Todd Davis. That isn't your AOB, is it?
No, it's not. Although I did see he signed, and I've read that he had a very strong finish to his Viking season last year, and they're actually thinking that he could provide a little bit more than just coming in to help the numbers during training camp. And that actually brings me to my AOB. It's training camp. I mean, we say we're close to the season, but we're still significantly a bit away from the real action. And the amount of supporters of every team, whether it's on social, whether it's just general chit chat with people, who get so caught up in the whole training camp. Player didn't do well today in training camp. Quarterback threw 3 interceptions. It's training camp. They're not even wearing pads yet, in training camp. Catching in short, so he looks great. It looks like he could have a good season. People just need to chill out. There's too many people going around giving out about players' performances in training camp and people signing for different teams. A lot of teams are picking up players now because they need to have players in camp to make it competitive. No more than that. But we'll see. Preseason games are around the corner.
Yeah, on camp, enjoy it. If it's your thing, enjoy it. But there are articles online saying, should we, from this time 12 months ago, saying, should we be concerned that Tom Brady threw 3 interceptions in his first 2 days at Bucs camp? Remind me, how did that one work out?
Well, I, for one, am delighted that we have the preseason starting on Friday morning our time. I want to say it's 1:20 in the morning. I'm not sure. It might be 1 a.m. our time or around that there. It's a Pro Football Hall of Fame game. We are back for a special episode at 10 o'clock on Thursday. We can't say who's coming on yet until it's recorded, but you don't want to miss it. It's really good. So we'll see you on Thursday night at 10 o'clock. Thanks to the Woolshed. Thanks to Matthew as well for videoing it in the Woolshed as well. And thanks to Trust, who bring all this lovely equipment into the whole situation. So we'll see you next week. Give us a follow at IRE NFL. And we're almost there, like 6 weeks to go, gentlemen, 6 Sundays to go. And we'll see you again on Thursday night. Cheers.